So that's the sort of finished building. It's very, very simple. It's been built entirely locally. A lot of natural daylight, expansive views, a lot of focus on orientation so that there are no blinds to be drawn, there's no glare, there are no curtains, a lot of natural daylighting. And again, each space tied into how it is to be worked, whether it's sort of working off the floor or working off tables. And we did sort of a mapping and then measured it against the real product, and we found that we have desirable daylight levels pretty much across 80% of that floor plate. In terms of then looking at going back to a net zero philosophy, but moving it more towards performative, we managed to have that solar roof that I showed you, which is angled to the latitude of the sun, so that it sort of becomes much cheaper to install rather than angling the solar panel. It's just a roof which allows for natural drainage, and with that obviously comes natural cleaning without having to do the subframe structure. And it allowed not only for sufficient energy over the last 6 months to run the unit, but it sort of gives that much more. We are unable to relate back to the grid, but we are currently energy positive, so that's sort of really, really useful. A lot of the interiors were done by using wooden rafters that were lying there. They were waste purlin sections, stone chisels used as door handles. So a lot of anything that you could get a hands on was reused, recycled, and brought into place. So just some other pictures of the site being used. Of course, they're wearing masks, but by and large, the building is light, it's airy, it sort of sits in the environment without much ado, and built by people, like I said, from the community itself. This year, it went on to win the FutureArc Green Leadership Award. In fact, I've got 2 projects that I'm going to show you. This is out of Singapore. And what was really interesting was what was picked. This was during the COVID times. And I've highlighted these words. This is from the Livable Cities Land Germany. He was one of the jurors. Honest, clear, transparencies, material, craftsmanship, productive, livable, energy, resources. And that's really, I think, the future of performative. It's sort of the idea of really going beyond just energy and daylight and water, but moving up a lot more towards performance based around safety, hygiene, wellness, resilience. And that's really what this project aimed to do, and it's been quite successful there. This is a project which is where our brief from the client, this is for Grant Thornton. They're one of the big 5 consulting firms in the world, and we designed this office not during the COVID times, it was pre-COVID, and they really wanted an office of the future. And it's in a very expensive, it's in Aero City, very high rentals in Delhi, and they had an area of about 11,000 square feet that Grant Thornton had taken on lease, and but their design brief was about double of that, just like everything else in architecture. Incredible amounts of brief, but not adequate amounts of area. And the normal way that would have been addressed is to densify that office. However, we were very happy to have a very good client, and what we managed to, I'll come back to the layout, what we managed to convince them was to move away from this notion of one function, one space. So if we look at the idea of overbuildability, how often is a meeting room used? How often are cabins used? How often why do people say that these sort of very traditional workstations that are, arrayed, mirrored, across the floor plate? And we came up with a system where the entire brief was addressed, albeit it was addressed by ensuring that everything on that floor plate, the furniture, the partitions, every space was reconfigurable into so something could turn into a video conferencing space, or it could just be a breakout space. It could be a large training center. It could be, so fitting in everything into that one space. And they had a terrace attached with it outside. And again, part of the program, we brought outside onto the terrace. But again, we did a lot of thermal studies. And this is Delhi. So Delhi goes through, all the summer, the winter, the monsoon. And the idea really was that, can we make this usable through the year, this outdoor space? And we did, and I'll show you some examples. So we used a combination of shading, dry misting, transpiration, and pretty much brought this outdoor space usable as a cafeteria, as an outdoor meeting space, outdoor workspace for about 80% of the year. This was last year. And what we were really happy to find is that a lot of that thinking in COVID time has actually played out really, really well. And so people who are coming into work can, because they're not sitting in enclosed spaces, there are various spaces that work, that transform, allows for flexibility. So all movable partitions, and right now they just kept the whole office open up. And social distancing, in some senses, now is not an issue. But even so sometimes half the people are working from home, they're much fewer or a lot more. But given the idea that each space becomes multifunctional, multi-flexible, they're able to use that same space without having to worry about how social distancing will make them now require even more space. So again, it serves as a coffee counter, but also serves for conferencing. Everything in this office has been designed with that in mind, which also allows great amounts of flexibility with how the air conditioning and the lighting is designed. But when everything is moving, and if you see these partitions and these tracks, so any space can be enclosed within a few minutes and turn into an enclosed space. That's actually a locker room, which is completely open, but then it has a slider which can provide privacy. So, moving away from this sort of modernist idea of one space, one function. Even all the tables, either you can work in small groups, or you can pull them, slide them apart. And this is all pre-COVID, and we were trying to do this for optimization, trying to get a lot more into a lot less, and yet not make it feel cluttered. But it's played out well during the pandemic times, and the outdoor spaces are being used a lot more in terms of, that's the cafeteria, bar, and people now come and use the space a lot more outside as well as the inside. And we recently also had we spoke to Mr. Chandio, who's the managing partner for India for Grant Thornton, and it was interesting to see the words that he used: collaborative, sustainable, future, tech, ecology, no cubicles, fun, healthy living, flexible working, whether in person or through technology. And I think that's really the new normal that we're going to be moving towards, of finding these words from our vocabulary of fun, healthy living, happiness, and blending them back into our architecture. So another project that completed recently, this is the Zydus Corporate Park in Ahmedabad. It's quite a large building. It's about 8 lakh square feet. They're also one of the forerunners right now for the vaccine. They're, I think, one amongst the top 3 in India who are pursuing this. And when we began this project, it was about 5 years back, and sort of a very challenging site in the sense that it fronted the expressway, and that was west. And we began to look at, for this particular project, again, trying to go beyond energy, going beyond sustainability. Of course, we made sure that the west-facing facade carried the entire core and created a microclimate behind for the offices to sit. So all that part would sit in the shadow, which would be the offices, and the core would sit up front, which would be the west. And that would protect all the workspaces behind. Idea not very different from how what the fort walls do. They sort of provide a cooler space behind the fort wall. We came up with some heuristic sketches of how these walls would respond to the solar condition? How can we, make sure that we have maximum amount of thermal buffer for what sits behind it? And we came up with sort of schematic sections and a basic sort of idea and a model of how we would take that very large flow plate at the back, break it up into more linear strips so that they're 100% daylit, north-south orientation, and use the core and the spine as a means of connection, but also use it more as a means of responding to the solar condition so that it focuses like a convex lens. It focuses the solar rays and picks that energy up, and then we can we transform that energy and use it in the building. So that's sort of how eventually the exploded plant turned. Now that was a sort of a great idea in terms of this sort of doubly curved surface, but and that's 150 meters by about 40 meters is a huge microclimatic doubly curved screen, which was set up to provide a completely different environment from outside to behind it for all the functions that stand behind, from the cafeteria, outdoor spaces, the offices, and use the spine for movement. So a lot of our inspiration did come from these sort of slightly curving ramparts. It came from a local craft, the Kansara craft, of how well they work the doubly curved surfaces. And we were thinking about how to build this at that time. And then, sort of this, the bungas, the mud huts of Kutch, where these glasses get embedded, and that's where the idea of really the convex and focusing the sun rays and using that to get some light on the inside, but also to use it as a lens to optimize on the energy usage. So we sat down and we used a lot of technology. I mean, this is Dynamo, to determine how these doubly curved wall, which was to be built by local contractors and local craftsmen, how would we send this data to them? It's a 150-meter long wall, about 40-50 meters high, and what would be the methodology of working that? So eventually, we managed to create this computational model, and based on that, we got all the data points, which we then translated into 2D drawings, which would be workable by how we pour concrete in India, which is still a reasonably manual process, but a combination of common Indian structuring systems. We couldn't afford a lot of the international technology. The doubly curved surfaces are very easy to make. And a small video of that, of the genius of the local workmen in combining high-tech digital technology, very hands-on construction. And then sort of that would be the final section where the office would sort of sit, and like I said, they're all north-south facing, and that would be the main protector, the fourth wall for these offices. I won't go through this. I've spoken a lot about our sustainability achievements in most of our projects. But here we did manage to, even with this building, get about 50% reduction in the energy performance. But more importantly, 90% daylighting on a very large floor plate building with zero glare. So moving inside the building now, which is the sort of spine that runs through, which is the fourth wall. Because it's sort of doubly curving, again, the geometry, the local craftsmanship had to respond to that condition of, it's not just a simple question of pulling a suit and putting a straight line, because everything is moving in multiple dimensions. But I must say, as much as we use the technology, the local workers were totally ingenious in the way they managed to get each joint, each structure. So, like I said, nothing here is Cartesian geometry, if I may. and yet the precision levels were incredible in how this sort of craft was put together, including the outdoor spaces, the microclimate, and the building's completed. It's in use right now. That's the sort of front facade of the building, and you can you can see the dichroics there embedded into it in the cotton steel. And that's the last statement that we got. It's from Bhagat Bhai Patel, who's the chairman of Zydus Kerala, that it's a place better than home. And why I'm pointing these sort of terms out is, as architects, we've used our own terminology to define our architecture. But I think the way people who use the buildings define architecture is, I think, should set the parameters for how we think about architecture post-COVID. Last project, I'm sure I'm out of time, is this hospitality complex in Faridabad. Very, very interesting project. It sits right on the edge of the sort of Aravali's, the Bhatkal Lake, and then this is the conservation zone, and it sits right on the edge, and there's a little forest next to our site, which had encroached and grown naturally onto the site. So when we looked at this site, our first reaction was, how do you respond? Of course, it's Faridabad in a reasonably harsh climate, not cut a single tree. And how do we create this environment for students who are going to come and study hospitality here and live here, so that they sort of feel that nature has moved through the building, and the building is not an imposition on nature. So keeping track of where all the trees were, creating some bioswales, which again was to hold the water, and we came up with a very old method of using bioswales as a system of collection tanks and then storing the water and reusing it. Working the local brick jallis, as you all know, that the brick kilns were shut down in pretty much all across India. But there were some kilns that had introduced the green methods of making bricks, but the bricks weren't really of great quality. So we had to sort of come up with different methods of working the brick in terms of the courses, so that our performance of the building, the craft, again, working with the local, it was an art genius. It was, again, traditional bricklayers who taught us a lot about what we wanted. We wanted ventilation, we wanted daylight, we wanted to keep the sun out, and we wanted to create privacy and various factors. And we worked with them, and through them, we managed to sort of develop these different kinds of bonds and things that we could do in brick, which I couldn't even imagine. So, sort of moving away from just pure cladding to actually using brick as a pure material. And these are the existing trees and the finished campus now. Like I said, it's all north facing. It's naturally ventilated, other than the laboratories, inside spaces, and again, even in these COVID time, this whole notion and relationship with nature, the indoor, the outdoor, the openness, the daylighting, just the natural quality, and I think that's sort of really gone a long way, even for us as architects, to understand how people are using the space. So I'm not really sure that the students who are the actual users of this building are looking at that architecture and saying, oh, is it great or is it not great or what? But they're using it in ways that are making us very happy about what we've done, either accidentally or by design. So that's the hostel and the front garden on the north. And again, this is the last of the project that I was showing you. Again, won the Green Leadership Award this year. And similar sort of feedback from the jury: natural, fresh, landscape, materiality, fear-driven security. I mean, because of the fact that everyone can see everyone and it's open, there are no gates, there are no walls, there are no lockable doors per se, other than for some of the rooms. And I think this sort of really is what we are beginning to think will define the next opportunity, the next wave of what we think is performative architecture. So so my closing line, like I said earlier, the pandemic is changing everything. It's changing the idea that in terms of master planning of cities, where we said transit-oriented development, intensify the city so that mobility is better. That notion is changing. Vertical transportation, that notion is changed. So everything's really come into question. And I really do think that this is a defining moment for us. And particularly, I think as Indian architects, we have a jump start on the rest of the world to find that lasting solution, to find the solution for the built environment, an environment that promotes wellness, safety, health, hygiene, and above all, happiness. Thank you.